Welcome, everybody, to my show, Building Resilience. This is a show where we showcase experts in their line of services that have gone through things in their life, but they are thriving today. So this is a show where we go deep in the human side. And today I have a wonderful host. I'm going to introduce her, but I always are talking how I got connected to the person. So Lydia Busler, she's a distinguished hornist. She's a composer and she's a peak performance coach. It has a career that she bridged from the real classic music, improvisation as an artistry. And today she's in the healing side. And she has a wonderful story how she began to do that. So she embarked in this journey when she was 16 years. So she began with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And well, let's talk about her because she has a wonderful story. I got connected with Lydia. I always mention that was I call divine connections because I was attending an event when I came back from my hostage situation. And I remember that event, there was a big crowd. The host of the event, he introduced a lady that she was going to do like a 1 minute breathing session, like a relaxation session. And he introduced Lydia, and I remember her with her doom, and that voice was like mesmerizing voice. And I was like, oh, wow, this is incredible. And every time I heard her was like, oh, wow, this is incredible. And one day I connected to her and I became to be part of a guest in her show. And well, Lydia, without more further ado, the mics are yours.
Thank you, Jose. It is so good to be on your show, and I love everything that you are doing. And yeah, aren't we glad that we're resilient? Aren't we glad that we didn't sit in and wallow in what we've had going on, but moved on so that we can actually help other people and have these conversations. So thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, Lydia has a show too that is a wonderful show, and she's transitioning to another show that we're going to have part of the conversation. So let's begin with her artistry journey. She began in the Boston Symphony Orchestra when she was 16 years. She was a kid. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, I had a I was I how do I say this? We were brought in it just a small amount of us that were the top performers for the opening of the new Heinz Center in Boston. And it was a big deal. Now it was new back then. This was, in the later 80s. So it's not as new now. But
Who
and
was the director by the time?
what's that? I was 16. It
No,
was
but the director of the symphony. Who was that director?
Oh, the director was John Williams, who is one of the directors of the
Hello.
Boston Symphony, and also the film composer.
Yeah.
So that all comes around, and you've probably all experienced him or in one way or another. But so I I got brought in for this, and I played principal horn, meaning the first horn means that I get to do like the solos. And we were in a performance for the opening of the new Heinz Center. Big, probably the biggest crowd I've ever played in my life. Maybe not quite the biggest crowd I've been in, but one of the biggest crowds I've ever been in. It was about 10,000 people seated in there.
Wow.
And the soloist was Yo-Yo Ma. And if you you may or may not have heard of Yo-Yo Ma, but if you haven't heard of him, you certainly have heard him. Um, and the thing about Yo-Yo is he is just a ray of sunshine. He is the most he's just he smiles. He does things to promote culture throughout the world, and he's a very, very good person. And a very astonishing cellist. So I was playing principal horn and we were playing the Dvorak cello concerto. And the Dvorak cello concerto has a lot of play between the cello and the first horn. So in the performance, Yo-Yo looked over at me because there was about to be a a solo that was going to be me, and then he would answer it. And he looked over at me and he gave me the biggest grin. And I just looked at him and I was enthralled and I just grinned back. And John Williams scowled. Oh, did he scowl? Oh, he was fuming. And I picked up the horn and put it to my lips and I played that solo. And then Yo-Yo played it and answered it, and life was beautiful. And life was beautiful the whole time. But to see that um that look of
His
anger,
face.
and like you guys are going to mess up this whole thing that I've worked so hard for, and nobody was going to mess up anything. So it sticks in my mind. It was a very human experience, and it was also a very amazing experience.
What was the reaction of the crowd when you were doing that solo?
They were quiet and they were mesmerized, because the good thing about a conductor is, unless hopefully they won't get too out of hand and turn around and growl at the audience, but usually they have their back to the audience. So if they're growling at the orchestra, nobody knows.
Wow, wow, wow. Well, quite experience having 16 years. So after that, how was your evolution as a musician?
Yeah. Um, I had a lot of sort of perfectionism, I think. I had perfectionism anyway, but going into be having those kinds of experiences, I believed in myself, and I also expected good things from myself. Um, and then I got in a really bad car crash, and it was an unusual car crash. I don't remember it. There was evidence of what happened. Um, it was in March, and um, it was right after a thaw. And I remember up until it, because I had a bottle of water on the seat next to me. I was driving on a back road, and the bottle of water fell over, and I uprighted the bottle of water, and then I was suddenly um, crashed into an oak tree, and it was a big tree, and I just saw I remember seeing the mirror crunch down near my face, and I didn't know who I was, but I said, "Wow, you look terrible." And luckily there was an EMT on the road 10 minutes behind me, or I wouldn't be here now. But the the car was between a mailbox, the car, and the tree had a oil stain 4 feet up on it, and the mailbox was untouched.
Wow.
And there was a little ridge of ice on the road. Otherwise, there was no snow or anything around. There's just this little ridge of ice, and apparently, I hit that ridge of
And, and,
ice,
and
and
you
I
sleep.
sailed up into the tree.
Wow.
but that's the only, nobody saw it. I don't remember it. So that's just what anybody could figure out. And my speedometer was stopped on 40 miles an hour. So I sailed into the tree at 40 miles an hour and the tree
Wow.
stayed still. So it's like putting 80 miles per hour of pressure on your body. So um I went to a hospital. I started to get some things fixed. Um I had some diagnostics, and then before I knew it, I was on a flight the to another hospital where they put the tubes in me while I was still awake. Usually they wait until you're under anesthetic, but they didn't have any time. And that felt very violent. And then I died very quietly. I died. I didn't stay that way, obviously, but it was beautiful. It was peaceful. It
How
was
did you
supportive.
saw, what did you saw when you died? Because this is a kind of a spiritual experience every
Yeah,
time I hear it.
right. And I've heard people saying what they saw as having a bright light. And for me, I felt held. I felt everything was soft and red around me, and I felt held and unconditionally supported and unconditionally loved and at peace. It There were no worries. There was no fear. There was no pain. It was just support and love. And there were no words, but there was just knowledge imparted. And I knew that I couldn't stay and I had to go back. And quite
Did you
honestly,
feel,
I didn't like going back.
but did you hear a voice saying that it was not your time, or was,
Yes, except it didn't say any words, but it was not my time.
okay.
I had work to do. I had a
So,
purpose, and I
so,
was told that.
wow, Lydia, I'm gonna say to you, you are fulfilling your purpose now. So that's beautiful. So my question is because, of course, that moment has to had to be like a pivotal moment in your life, and and tell me a little bit how you begin to do what you are doing today, because you went through a healing process, and that is part of what you do today. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Um, well, something I realize now, I didn't realize it then, but it was that I wanted to be a veterinarian. Even though I was all musically trained and artistically trained too, I went to art school, I went to music school, but I wanted to be a veterinarian. I realize now that creative energy is healing energy. They're both the same. Um, so but back then I felt like I was taking the path of least resistance. And I used to give myself a hard time about that, saying, "Oh, you're just doing the music because it's easy." And it it was it, it wasn't necessarily easy. And I had other things that got in the way of it. I first after that um after that car crash, when I got back to things, and I was in a jury, what's called a jury, for music, and I performed. It's part of getting your degree, and I
Mhm.
performed my solo that was prepared perfectly, and everybody was very happy. And then I performed. They asked me to sight read, and I was terrible. I couldn't sight read at all, and they gave me a really hard time and scorned me. And I determined at that point that I would never let that happen again. And then just put that aside. But I then went and educated myself very well to do music very, very, very well. And and then while I was just finishing school, about 5 years after that car crash, all of a sudden my knee. crumpled underneath me, just crumpled. I was walking down the street and I fell down and I had no knee left. So I went to a doctor and I went to an orthopedic surgeon, and it turned out that you have two ligaments crossed in the back of your knee. The anterior cruciate and the posterior cruciate like a cross. And the one behind is the posterior cruciate. And that's the one that was gone for me. It was completely gone.
But that was
And
a consequence of the car crash. You had 5 years.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So on the sides, also the medial lateral and the lateral collateral had some instability from. And the thing is, when I was in the hospital 5 years before, my knee was really strange. It just kind of went around in all sorts of directions, but they were busy fixing because I had a lot of abdominal trauma. Um, so I had head trauma and abdominal trauma, and the knee, they fixed my face. I had a plastic surgeon come in, and I ended up with a good face, but the knee, it just rested. And then when I left, I was very weak, and I gradually built up my strength, and I biked and I hiked and I skied after I, got my strength up, and I built up good muscles. But the ligament was apparently holding on by a thread. And finally, just walking down the street, that thread broke.
No
So
biking, no hiking, only walking.
no, no, just walking. So that surgeon kept that surgeon said that he would do the surgery on my knee, that it hadn't even been it hadn't been performed on the East Coast before. So he went to great lengths to study this, and he had actually done his doctoral thesis on this surgery. And I said, great. And he said, but they've only done it out west. If you'd like to go out west. And then we looked into that, and out west, apparently, it had only been done about 20 times, and each of those had been redone 3 times. I said, no, you've been studying this. I trust you. And I did. I did trust him. Um, there was no point for me going out west only to have it done again and again and again. So um, coincidentally, I had also, remember, I had worked really hard to not mess up again in music. I had gotten into an international competition, so I was going to go to Europe because I had gotten in the finals for that international
Okay.
competition.
Yeah.
So, and that was going to be after I got out of surgery. So I was looking forward to going to Europe with my new knee, you know. And then finally we were having the surgery, and as I was going under anesthesia, they changed the anesthesiologist. So I trusted my doctor, my surgeon, and I had met my anesthesiologist and I was fine with him, but this one gave me just a sick feeling in my stomach. I felt um, really like I didn't trust him at all.
Okay.
But I was going under anesthesia, and that was the last I knew of it. It was an 11-hour surgery, so I woke up a long time later, and my leg was huge. It was the size of a city. It was so big. But I was very sick, just from all that anesthesia, and wasn't really worried about anything. I was busy trying
Wow.
not to be sick over the side of the bed. And my mother was there at that point, and she had come to visit me, and there was a nurse there who said, I've never seen a tourniquet left on that long. And I didn't know what that meant. Like I said, I was so sick from the anesthesia. So the leg stayed that big for about 2 weeks. And then um, after 2 weeks, it suddenly, the swelling went down, and it went down to bone. I had no leg left.
Wow.
And and the pain was unbelievable, worse than anything I'd
So these
ever.
guys did a terrible job. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So apparently what happened, I mean, the long and the short of it is the guy did they're supposed to take the tourniquet, the anesthesiologist is in charge of the tourniquet, and they're supposed to put it on and then take it
Take it
off
off.
or loosen it so that some blood can get in and then tighten it
Yeah.
up again and then loosen it every 2 hours. And he did that for the first couple of times for the first 4 hours, but he left it on for the entire rest of the
Wow.
time. And remember, I said this was an 11-hour surgery.
Wow.
But still, I didn't know what had gone on, so I was trying to find the answers, and that same anesthesiologist kind of pretended to try to help and gave me a lumbar block and tried to figure it out, gave me a whole bunch of Percocet, which didn't touch the pain. I don't know if you know about Percocet, but it gave me enough to, to flatten a football team, and I kind of didn't touch the pain. And so I I was just I didn't know what was going on, and I was supposed to be going off to this competition. So the nurse showed up again, and she was very compassionate, and she gave me my records, and she told me, she's the one who taught me about how the tourniquet is supposed to work. And she showed me that
So she knew that the guy was doing wrong.
she
Wow.
knew.
Wow.
Um, the surgeon didn't really, because the surgeon is very busy doing that one job and is down in the work and isn't looking at what's going on up above, but the tourniquet is up by the hip. And so my entire leg it just suddenly was gone. It doesn't, muscles don't atrophy when you sit around for 2 weeks. They just don't. They may get less strong, but they don't go away. And mine had gone away. I had nothing left to my leg. It was just skin on bone. And the pain was really, really horrible. It was like a more like a sword. Like
Wow.
really just very, very thick, wet sword going up through the bottom of my foot up to my knee over and over again.
Wow. And
And that's
what happened after?
I there was a lawsuit that came up, and
Well,
I
I was
tried.
thinking in that the lawsuit.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's what most people would say. And you would think that would work. I actually had a law firm that dealt in malpractice, and they were very concerned, and they were very excited to help with both the malpractice and the fact that my plans to my career was
They screwed up everything.
they
Your
screwed up everything.
yeah.
So they were calling every day and giving me updates. And then one day they stopped calling. And I thought, huh. And then another day and another day, I called them, and they acted like, what? Who are you?
What
Like
incredible.
this is a very Twilight Zone kind of story. But that's how a lot of trauma is, right? It's like you can't make this stuff up. They didn't know who I was. So I said, wait, I'm the one that,
So
you know,
they treated like you were never had no contact
r-
with them.
right, right, right. Finally, they said, oh, okay, yeah, we have your records right here. No, we don't have any case. We can't represent you. I said, why? They said, there's nothing, no malpractice was done. Yeah, you're just weird. You just have a weird leg. It's not. So I asked for my medical records back, and they sent them back, and they were altered. Now, now in retrospect, I'd say make a copy of your medical records and send the copy. Um, but I didn't do that. I sent the original records, and they were
So
all
this
altered.
sounds like a conspiracy. This guy between the doctor and the hospital and them.
Yeah. I found out that anesthesiologist was known as coming from a very deeply wealthy family, and he, probably just paid them off. And uh, but and that's not about, he had the means to pay them off. That's fine. That's not about the wealth. It's about the integrity.
Lydia, I can see a movie there.
Right. I know.
Have you ever thought into the movie? I can see the movie there, It's
Right.
a
Yeah,
thriller,
I know. Well, this story is actually in a book that's coming out July 1st, but
I can see Julia Roberts or somebody doing your
yeah,
characters.
it was crazy, but and it was also heartbreaking. Because I just kept working. And in the meantime, I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks until I had acupuncture. Um, and that gave me the first, I had never had acupuncture before. I had no reason to think it would work, but that gave me the first sleep I had. Um, but I was a mess, and they said, oh, can't help you. So when I got the records back and they were altered, I went to try to find the nurse because the nurse was the one, she knew the truth. No record of that nurse ever having worked at that hospital.
So they disappeared, the nurse. So
The nurse disappeared. No idea where she went.
wow. Wow.
So at that point, my family all got really upset and said, okay, we need to sue the lawyer and the doctor and the hospital and and I didn't mention that I was actually fairly newly married at this time. So I'm not married anymore, but the person I was married to was taking a different approach, and because I was told finally by a neurologist that I was never going to walk again, and I was never going to probably be out of this pain, and that I might be able to do pain management. But because I was still in my 20s, I could probably grow a little bit. People can still grow some nerves in their 20s, but never past that. And that they grew at about an eighth of an inch a year. Now, this was like 3 feet, like a meter of nerves that I had lost. But I could grow maybe an eighth of an inch a year. So the neurologist gave me no chance of growing back nerves. It just wasn't going to happen. And so my ex-husband said, maybe we should have a compassionate suicide. Let's just help you end all of this.
Did he have a good life insurance on you?
I don't know. So
Maybe he
honestly,
had a 1 or 2 million life insurance behind that.
right. So at this point, honestly, I honestly had a just a shift. Everything in me shifted. And I said no to my family. I wasn't going to sue anyone anymore. No, I wasn't interested in
Yeah, you
suicide.
want to live your life.
And I said, no, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I can walk. And everything in me shifted to make that happen. And in making that shift, I was supported by everything. I'm not saying I was out of pain. I'm not saying I didn't scream and yell and work really hard, but I was supported, and I grew back those nerves in a year and a half, all
Wow.
of them.
Wow.
I had a leg. When I saw that, when I said I'm fine, I saw myself out in the garden with two normal legs, bare feet, working in the garden, and everything in my being shifted to make
You
that
you begin to
a reality.
visualize it. You begin to visualize it. What were you doing? Like morning praise, visualizing this, or what you were doing to
It was all at once that I saw that vision, and that's when I determined that I was going to heal, and that it was very sudden. And then I didn't know how I was going to heal. I did somewhat normal things, but I was young. I didn't know what normal was. I went to physical therapy every day. I worked really, really hard in physical therapy. I ate a lot of raw eggs, a lot of raw eggs, because that was suggested to me because I needed those amino acids.
Okay.
And I did acupuncture, which, as I say, it was the first time in my life that I had done acupuncture. And those were the only things that I did besides working really hard. Now, if anybody could grow nerves from eating raw eggs and going to physical therapy and going to acupuncture, they'd all be doing it. It would be in all the medical journals, but it wasn't, and it's not. It just worked for me.
Have you ever thought going to a, a doctor that can make like a research about that as a possible technique to heal others? Using
I
that?
I'm going more um from the perspective of kind of influence. Like the more people see your show and the more people said I have there's a book coming out right now that has this story, the more it becomes part of what people know is possible. Kind of like your story. They don't know until they do.
Yeah,
But um, in the case of this, because I am now very, very much realizing that, yeah, we have the power to heal, and and it's about belief and presence,
yeah,
and
yeah,
also compassion and forgiveness. If I had put all my energy into the lawsuit, I would not have had the energy to
yeah,
heal, and I would
yeah,
still
yeah,
not have a leg.
yeah. That's true. You know, Lydia, when you're talking, I'm thinking something. Now that we are connected, and I always talk about the divine connections that we really, I truly believe that God is making divine connection. It's kind of a movement of people that have gone through incredible situation in their life, but are today here showing that things are possible and that you're doing things to spread that word. I see that in you. And I see that in you because it's what I'm doing too also. And I see a lot of people doing too. This is something like it's like a big movement that is happening. That
Is a
is like
big
a
movement.
it's like a awakening that is happening, that the people
Yes.
can discover that the things can be done, and you can make possible what can be impossible. Because what you did is make possible the impossible.
Yeah.
So wow, it's incredible, incredible. So I mean, so that was your turning point when you discovered that you could heal yourself.
Yeah, and it was really, but it was still very much a later thing. I knew that. I started to believe in myself, and I went through and I did music after that. I missed out on that competition, and it was a kind of competition where you had to be young, and I was going to be too old the next time it was coming around. So I missed out on that entirely. But I went and did other things in music, and I played in great groups, but I went on to become an improvisational artist. And when I did that, I went around the country and I coached people and I did clinics and I taught them how to be free. When people want to be free, but then when they get to be free, like, here, just play something, we freeze up because we don't know how to be free. We're very used to pushing against our barriers, and
Mm-mm.
and so I taught people how to give themselves a little security, a container instead of a barrier that they could push against, and how to free themselves. And I realized how much that I was helping people and healing people as I did that. And then, time went on, and then Um, I was divorced, which changed my course of everything because I had a son who was still in school, and so I stopped touring around and I just stayed home. And it's a fairly rural place, so I didn't have as much work in music. And I went in and I was working in wine because that's another thing that I do is like food and wine. But um, and I when we had the pandemic, people were saying, "Oh, I can't work," and for me, I said, this is great. I can work on shifting to doing this. And I just thought about all those people that I helped and what the mindset shift is and how what we realize what it is that we can do and what we believe in. And so I just started putting everything into training for the things that I already did. I was already a performance coach, but
Yeah,
into
you
how to
transform
really
that in
heal.
some. Yeah,
Yeah, into how we can heal. And it comes like I said from belief and presence, but you can't have that belief shift, which is radical, without having a basis of calm.
correct. Yeah. And when comes the podcast? How the podcast can come
And
into
it
this?
came with the
Because now comes the podcast.
the that came with there've been a few things that I've left out. I did have a traumatic brain injury in among all this stuff. It's just part of when you crash your car into something, all sorts of things break. And later on you have some trouble. So I found that there was a point later in which I just stopped being able to speak. And through I have a good neurological team now, and my brain is under control, but it wasn't then. And I again, just like with the horn, I determined to make it so that I could speak and to really, and part of that is pharmaceuticals. But then I wanted to speak well. And having those conversations, like it's how we communicate. I communicate a lot through music, of course, but most people are communicating with talking. And on giving clinics, I had to be able to talk. And so when it just came to me, I said, I want to do this. I want to have this podcast, and I want to talk to other people who have had something happen in their life, and they've lifted themselves, and now they're lifting others. And that brought in all kinds of different people, like you, like
Yeah,
people who had a totally different industry, that whatever they had happened, it could have been suicidal thoughts. It could be kidnapping and imprisonment, and it could be trauma of a childhood sort. It could be accidents. They all had lifted themselves, and now we're lifting others. And so that's the joyful path. And it was
uh,
just about it was like making sure that I kept my voice in practice and could communicate meaningfully with other people.
the people that are hearing this, Lydia has the joyful path. I was a guest in her shows, in her
Twice.
twice. It was supposed to be three times, but I skipped the third because I don't know, something would happen that I cannot make it. I should have been done three times, but I have been twice. So as she's saying, it's an incredible show. But you're making some change right now. That you told me the other day that you're creating a new show.
Yes, I had the sixth season. I ended the sixth season of the Tuesday telecast from the Joyful Path. The Joyful Path channel still exists on YouTube, but I am just starting Healing Between Thoughts. And
Mm,
it's just more focused on this radical shift in belief, whether it's whatever it is for people, and how that happens, because it's not something that we think about.
yeah.
It's not, we can think and think, and it doesn't work. we have to feel into it. It's between the thoughts. And so I want to I'm talking to the audience about what that's like. And I'm also going to have people on the show. It's just starting now, um, who can also speak to this specific radical concept of what happens between your thoughts.
Are you going to begin to book people? How is going to be the process? If somebody that's hearing this say, hey, this is me, how they can contact you?
Yeah. I am, if you look up my name, I'm pretty much able to be found. But if you go to the Joyful Path on YouTube, that is at the Joyful Path, and that's me. And you can reach out to me right there, right in the header where it tells the information. You can go to any of my websites and contact me right in there. So that's a great way to get in touch with me.
Lydia, we're coming to the end. Has been a great conversation. You have 5 minutes to talk anything you want. You have been promoting this new show, but talk anything that you want to promote, any program, anything that you want to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Well, now that I've done all of this work and I've been one way that Jose knew me or first knew of me was in this room he mentioned where
Doom,
I was, and a lot of
doom.
people know this because I lead these meditation rooms or these guided calm that helps you to go to that place between your thoughts and just connect your mind, your body, and your soul. And that we have to do that before we can do any of this healing work, before we can focus, before we can get in our purpose. We have to be able to just have a moment of calm. So this is something that I do and what people know, but what they don't necessarily know is that at on my website, joyfulpathvibe.com, there is a membership where you can get that all the time. And there are three different paths. There's one for healing and focus, and one for sleep, and one for um, purpose. And each of these paths you can go down, and there are resources, there are guided meditations, there are things that go on for hours. I actually compose music for this, and that you can sleep to. There's a gentle community where you can have reflection, and that's just a membership. It's really um, self-guided. You can just go through there, repeat anything you want, wander through at will, and there's an ever-growing collection of stuff in there for you. So that's something that can help anyone, especially anyone. Meditation is not a single thing. It's what you brings you to the place where
Yeah,
you are calm, where you can have what you need. If that's walking in the woods for you, do that.
yeah.
If that's my voice, I'm here. And I also have a couple of books that are one that's coming out on July 1st that tells a lot about this story and some other parts of it and similar stories of other people. It's called We Are More Than Our Diagnoses,
Oh, wow.
and it's an anthology. So July 1st, that is going to be released. And then shortly after that, my own personal book that's coming out right now is Many Paths to Peace, where I talk about the different cultural um, masters and the ancient cultural practices that have always strived for peace and happiness. And I talk about those, and I link them together. I talk about them separately. I give resources for if any of them seem appealing to you, and I have exercises in the end of it for following any of those paths.
And the movie?
And the movie, if somebody wants to do this, I actually, I also write music, right? Because that's,
You can
I'm
compose the
always a
movie,
musician.
John
So
Williams and her.
I'm writing music for someone else's movie. But if somebody wants to write a movie about this,
When you were talking about the conspiracy between the law firm and that's great for a
there's
movie. It's
there's
really,
there's
is
a
that
lot, right? Well, you have a movie in you, I have a movie in me, but
everybody
I'm
has a
not a
movie.
film writer. Somebody else would have to come up with
Yeah,
this.
we have to put these shows in the right place, and then somebody can pick it and say, "Hey, there's a story there." Maybe two movies. Well, I'm in the path to do with that. I'm working with somebody that's right, so a movie can come maybe in 1 year. I don't know, but
Yeah, yeah,
I'm already in that process. Somebody contacted me, and we're doing some uh, communications. We're talking there,
yeah,
but
yeah, of
wow,
course.
Lydia, this was a great show. We're coming to the end, so I'm gonna give you one last minute that you say anything you want to say to the audience.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you've made it this far and you're interested in how you can heal and how you can be calm, if you're just having anxiety, and it's not just anxiety, it's huge. I want you to know that you can find resources at the Joyful Path on YouTube. You can find resources at joyfulpath5.com, but also search these words, find things for your anxiety. You don't have to be at the whim of what anybody else says. If it doesn't work for you, do something else. And whenever you can, notice your breath, because that is the energy of life. Just notice how beautiful it is, how fresh it is when it comes in, and it's just a little bit warmer as it comes out.
Mhm.
When we breathe together as humans, we connect to ourselves, we connect to one another. So whatever works for you, make sure you notice your breath.
Wow, Lydia, that was a beautiful program. To the audience that's hearing this, Lydia can be found, as he said, in the YouTube channel, the Joyful Path. Um, I'm going to air this in a couple of weeks. But for me, it's an honor having you here and knowing what you're doing, all the process you went through, how you use it to help others. And then, as I mentioned, this for me is like a big movement. The people that are doing great things in life, and this is what this show is about. Contacting these type of stories, people that have gone through an incredible thing, but they have not only survived it, now are helping others. Thank you, Lydia, for being here in this show. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. It was a pleasure.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye. Next week, I'm going to have another great guest. Remember, we are in the series Meet the Expert, and she is an expert. Thank you. Thank you, Lydia, for being here. Bye.
Bye.
If you're a leader, you need to hear this. Great leadership isn't about having followers. It's about making more leaders. The real measure of leadership isn't about power or position. It's about impact and influence. The best leaders uplift, mentor, and empower others to reach their full potential. Leadership isn't about control. It's about creating a culture where people feel valued, inspired, and ready to grow. Remember this. If you treat your employees like they make a difference, they will. Join us in transforming leadership into a movement. Watch this video and see the incredible difference it makes when leadership is about building leaders, not followers. What's the best leadership advice you've ever received? Drop it in the comments.
In the face of adversity, true leaders rise. This is the power of resilient leadership. But when crisis strikes, how do they respond? They adapt, they innovate, they persevere. That's the essence of resilient leadership. turning setbacks into comebacks.